welcome to this May 13th, 2020 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this new remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's stay home, stay safe order. This format enables City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Cable 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcasts and meeting materials webpage. And as always, other avenues of communication with me and city councilors are available, including email and voicemail. Thank you for joining us. And with that, our first item of business on the agenda is a COVID-19 update. I believe we have the chief here. Matt, you gonna kick it off?
I think Chief is prepared. I'm just gonna let him go.
Great.
My apologies if I jumped the gun there. My apologies. Good afternoon, Mayor, councilors, City Manager, and community members of Eugene. It's our May 13th COVID update. Let's go ahead and start with the basic information. So still as of today, we're sitting at 61 total cases with 51 recovered, and the 2 unfortunate deaths, and 8 folks resting at home. We still currently we have no one in the hospital at this time, and we've completed over 6,300 tests in Lane County right now. They've also completed some testing in some of our vulnerable populations. So last week was over at the Lane Event Center, and they tested 90 folks over there. I think they want to do another 70. And then we are coordinating with the county to do testing in our designated temporary shelter sites as well. This week they've also started, I believe, at some of our care facilities, long-term rehab type facilities as well, to see where we're at there. So those are all really good signs. We've continuing on our track of downward cases as indicated here on the right side of the chart. So going in a positive direction there. So kind of looking ahead. Phase 1 has been all the talk, especially since last Thursday when the governor released some of her initial guidance on what that might look like for specific sectors within around the state. And so Lane County actually submitted their application on the 8th, and that had to meet those 7 phases criteria I've been talking about for the last few weeks, which is the decreasing cases over 14 days. We've got sufficient personal protective equipment. We have the hospital capacity. We have testing capacity. That testing capacity is we have to be able to do 500 tests a day. That effectively equates out to 1% of the population of Lane County per week. And so those pieces are going into place. The Bertelli personal protective mask decontamination unit is here in Eugene and is put together and going into service, and that can provide 80,000 decontaminations per day and will service a 200-mile range for that. So we've got to be able to track the disease. So we had to demonstrate, the county had to demonstrate that we have the ability when if we have an increased number of cases that we can do the contract tracing on that. Early on, the question was asked, well, what is the training required to be one of those folks that can do contract tracing? This morning, Johns Hopkins University released an online free class that you could take. It's a 5-hour class that educates you on how to be a contact tracer. So found that very interesting. If all that is approved, we would move forward to phase 1 on May 15th. So that is this Friday. Right now, we have not received approval. So we are anxiously awaiting that either today or tomorrow, what the conclusion is for that. So what does phase 1 look like, especially here in Eugene? Well, we started releasing a few things at the statewide level, actually back on May 1st. That's where Governor Brown allowed non-urgent medical procedures to reopen. So those were our dentists and some of our urgent care folks, some outpatient surgeries, et cetera. And then again on May 5th, recreation, where physical distancing can be followed, including some state day parks and day use areas, as well as some boat ramps were opened up. And then we do know also on May 15th that some standalone retail stores that were previously closed can now follow OSHA guidelines and open, and these would include some stores such as furniture stores, art galleries, jewelry shops, boutiques, etc. We're also anticipate getting further guidance on the statewide reopening of childcare this week. We just checked it 5 minutes ago. It still hasn't been released. And also some further guidance on transient summer school camps, youth activities, etc. We're still waiting on some information and guidance on that as well. So looking at the chart, it's 3 columns. You can see the current, so that's where we're at right now in our current status. The new statewide column that's information, or that's opening up that we would see that goes out across the whole state, and not just those counties that are in phase 1. And that's what the 3rd column is. This is what would be allowed if you are a county that is approved to move forward to phase 1. So as you can see, just with the childcare, the new state guidance, we're also the summer schools, the outdoor rec pieces, and then restaurants and bars would stay takeout only, unless you're a phase 1 county, which is what we're hoping to be on Friday. And so some of the limitations with restaurants and bars are things that we see is, sit down with 6-foot distancing requirements. Employees would be required to wear some type of a cloth or paper or disposable type face covering. The on-site consumption of food and beverages would have to be completed at 10 o'clock at night. Condiments would have to be in single servings, so your ketchups, your mustards, etc. The tables wouldn't be preset. And there would also, we're going to see a pretty substantial increase in the cleaning requirements that are associated with that as well. One of the other questions that have been coming out has been things like personal care. So these are our barbers, etc. So as you work across the chart here, if you're a phase 1 county, there will be some of those services to be allowed, but it's going to come with some rules, such as you have to do a basic client screening for symptoms. So some of those basic questions: Are you suffering? Do you have any of those things? And if your client does, then you would probably need to reschedule that appointment. Maintain some contact information, again, for that tracing component. Maintain physical distancing unless you're actively providing the services, and certainly wear a mask when you're providing those direct client services. Gyms is another one. We still haven't seen the direct information. We anticipate it's going to be developed, but we predict it'll have physical distancing, sanitation requirements, and probably limit the number of people in that particular space, is what we predict there. And the other one is local gatherings. And so tentatively, we see that we potentially might see groups up to 25, but also with the travel component, still no unnecessary travel. In the guidance, it was pretty specific. Your travel should be limited to obtain services in an urban setting. Should only require 2 to 3 miles. Obviously, if you're in a more rural setting, it would be quite a bit further along. So we would stay in this phase for at least 21 days before we have the potential to move on to phase 2, which would be on or around June 5th. Moving forward, still doesn't alleviate our needs. So I'm going to hit the constant reminder here of, even though you're in phase 1, our vulnerable populations still need to stay home. We need to maintain that hygiene, cleaning, sanitation, etc. If you're sick, please don't come to work. Please don't congregate. Please stay at your residence. Might see some limited visitations in some types of facilities, but I would probably stress the limited piece. Still haven't seen the guidance completely yet. And then I've already talked about the gatherings and travel. And telework still continues to be recommended in this particular phase. So while retail businesses may be opening up, the state still encourages those who can telecommute during phase 1 to continue to do that. Masks is always the question, and that was actually a topic of discussion on Monday night's council as well. So here's what we know so far is, when it comes to required, or those employees that are working in those types of venues, such as groceries and pharmacies, etc., ride sharing, it's strongly recommended businesses with those employees that are wearing those masks require masks for their customers. And we've seen that already. And Costco is a good example. I don't think you can go into Costco now without being properly masked. They're metering folks going into the building and maintaining the proper spacing. And then it's strongly recommended masks be worn in any indoor space, especially where 6 feet of physical distance can't be maintained. And certainly we know where those places are. We've talked about them quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. City services. So, what does that look like for us? Well, we're going to continue to maintain those critical services. We've established telecommuting pretty well here in the last 8 weeks. In fact, we've also demonstrated that here in the EOC, where we run almost virtually. We do run in a virtual environment, so that limits the number of physical folks here at the EOC. Certainly, we'll continue providing services, and many departments have demonstrated how they can do that via online and by phone and appointment. We've made many of these accommodations already through imaginative ways, through our permitting department and PDD and the libraries. Just totally awesome when it comes to that stuff. Preparing for the safe opening of facilities. So we're having many discussions around what does that look like for us, and so how, with our first priority being the safety of our staff, and then ensuring the safety of community members if there's some type of an interaction, and then how do we bring those services and those folks back up online. So lots of discussions around that, and specifically centered around the safety plans associated with that. Certainly what's after phase one? Well, there was phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2, remember I said not at least 21 days. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see some potential option for increased work in offices. So bringing maybe a higher population of folks back to work. We tentatively might see the authorization for some larger gatherings and maybe some limited visitations with hospitals and care facilities, et cetera. We're really, from the paramedic in me really wants to be careful with that population. They're very vulnerable, and we routinely see things like norovirus go through a care facility as an example on a regular basis. So we just need to be very careful with that fragile population. And then phase 3 is our highest risk, and that's just because we're going to that phase 3. And I think what's interesting here is the current state guidance is we're not going to go there until we have a reliable treatment or vaccine. And I think that's going to be quite a ways out, just watching the news feeds, et cetera. Certainly there's plenty of testing and development going on, but it's not something that's going to come like this summer. So that would, once we get to phase 3, we would reopen concerts, conventions, live audience, sports, et cetera. But the governor's office has recommended canceling those types of venues through September. And I think we've seen many of those cancellations already. So with that, I will certainly open up to any questions that folks may have.
Okay, thank you, Chief. It looks like I have Claire up first.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief, for the thorough update, as you always give us. I had a couple of questions that are actually related to the county, so you probably aren't going to be able to answer them, but if you would be willing to find out the answer, that would be appreciated. When Dr. Ludke spoke with us, he said that current contact tracing was being done by public health nurses. And I'm just wondering if they are planning to staff up contact tracers here in Lane County. And if so, are they going to be requiring them to be RNs?
So I could go back and we can reference the application that was submitted, and that was specifically addressed in the application, and we can send that to you. Right now in the county, we have the capability, I believe, for up to 20 cases, but we start to go above that, then they're going to need more outside help. And the state has been working on that component, and that my understanding is if we have a higher need for those capabilities, we could request those folks be sent to us. As to the certification requirement, I can't speak specifically to that. However, I did review the Johns Hopkins test course, and what they're doing there is the state of New York is looking at hiring a couple of thousand folks, and the taking of that program and having that credential is part of it. So I think there's a broad breadth there of folks as to the level, but I will follow up with that, and I'll also send you the package that addresses that.
Thank you. So if I heard you correctly, if we need more capacity for those kind of workers, the state would be providing them?
I think I won't specify that. I don't know if they'll actually provide them. We'll reach out to the state because the state is preparing to have folks available to help us with that.
Okay.
I'll get a specific.
And then if you, the other follow-up from Dr. Ludke's presentation is that I had requested, and I saw other counselors appreciated this request, if he would be willing to share with us some version of the response he said he gave to a colleague who was passing around a video from two emergency room doctors who were downplaying the seriousness of the infection rate and those kinds of things. And Dr. Ludke said he would consider sending it to us or some modified version, and I just wanted to follow up on that request.
Absolutely, got that. We'll work that too.
Great, thank you so much. That's it.
All right, Alan.
Thanks, Mayor. I was going to ask the same question Claire had about testing or about the contact tracers, but the other question I wanted to ask was about testing, and what is our capability of doing testing today? I think we're doing 250 a day or something like that, and as we move into phase 2 and phase 3, people going out and participating in the economy is going to be dependent on whether or not they feel safe doing that and whether or not other people feel like they're not going to get infected, which I think all gets back to testing. So what's our capability and prognosis for being able to ramp up testing to a really significant degree to be able to make people feel comfortable as we get into phase 2 and phase 3?
So don't know what our capability to really ramp up is, but we're required to be able to complete 500 tests a day to enter into phase 1. And the package that was submitted states that we do have that capability and capacity.
Okay, good,
right.
Good. Could we do 5,000?
I can't speak to that. The exact number, I don't know. I
Is
can
that
follow up with the county specifically. I think what we're going to start seeing more of is I'm seeing a lot more of the distribution of the point of care systems, such as made by Abbott. And so as this continues to evolve, when you start getting to that point of care, so the smaller machine capabilities like that, you can start seeing more of those in urgent cares and more primary care physician offices, et cetera. And so we'll continue to see the proliferation of that piece. But in terms of our current maximum, I can't speak to that. I just know that we can do at least 500 to interface.
That'd be a Dr. Ludke question.
Yep.
Probably. So if we could get that from him, that would be great. So would it be fair to say that our testing capability right now is we're testing people that are potentially sick, but we're not testing people that are just generally curious or don't show symptoms?
So yeah, on May 1st, the Oregon Health Authority released further guidance to allow for a broader based testing, but you still have to have some level of symptoms associated with that. And some of the testing that the county has done has been asymptomatic testing in those vulnerable populations, which I addressed earlier. So that's, obviously targeting those specific areas. And then we've seen around the state also some research testing that's gone on as well. If you're following OHSU is going to be doing a large testing program of 100,000 people, and those card mailers are actually supposed to go out either yesterday or today, asking people to volunteer to be tested, and they're trying to do a sweep across obviously all the regions of the state, socioeconomic status, ethnicity, et cetera, to try and get a broad test in this research to see how embedded this disease is across our state.
Yeah, two comments about that. One comment, one question. One was we need to be careful about that data. Putting out data that, like I've seen potentially by ethnicity, could create some discriminatory tendencies in our society, and which might not be appropriate. And the fact that some lower income and ethnic groups have higher propensity to have shown that there's a higher propensity to be infected is quite worrisome with the data. Question I had was about the testing itself. So Lane County has a certain amount of tests. Where do they get them? Is that from the state? I know that the feds have just completely washed their hands of all this, and there's no plan at all, as far as I can tell, from the federal government and the Trump administration to help the states coordinate any of this stuff. So states are competing against each other to get the same testing equipment that is all in low supply because there's no federally coordinated plan. So are we relying on the state to get our testing, or is it the county that's actually doing it?
Yeah, I can't specifically speak to that. I'll follow up the county on that, because I think there's the other piece is it's not just the county, but it's also our local labs are doing testing as well. And then also our hospitals. And then, as you know, the University of Oregon in conjunction with McKinsey Willamette. So I think we've got a multitude of different testing venues and options here. It's not just from one source.
Right. I wanted to comment on how the U of O has really stepped up and been a big partner in helping us get to using their labs and their facilities and their knowledge and expertise to be able to help us get through this. They've stepped up big time. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. My question, thank you, first of all, Chief, for the report itself. Not only that, but all of the work that you and everybody is continuing to do to keep people safe. I appreciate it. My question is similar to Alan's, but I'm sensing from what you just said, you won't have a specific answer to it. So I'm going to ask you to get us one as quickly as possible and let us know. But my question is, what prevents us from being able to do 4,000 or 5,000 tests a day?
I think Councilor Zelenka actually hit that a little bit in terms of its availability of product. So it's not necessarily the capacity. Sometimes it's the test taking material, and it could be as simple as the long swab that's required to obtain that postpharyngeal testing.
Forgive me, I wasn't saying sometimes or general reporting. I'm asking about Lane County specifically. And I would like to know what it will take, because I'd like to effort at changing that. What will it take for us to be able to do 4,000 or 5,000 tests a day? I'll refrain from commenting on the political aspects of that comment, but are you aware? I read recently about the idea of doing what's called, I think, batch testing, of testing multiple people at a time because the reagent can do it. And then with any positive, bringing those folks in individually so that you can test a larger number of people more quickly. Can you speak to that?
I cannot.
See that?
Somebody from a lab.
I'd love to know the answer to that too. Why should we not do that, or why are we not doing that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Emily.
Thank you. So we are doing 500 tests a day right now?
We have the capability. Part of the requirement for us to move to phase 1 is that we have the capability to complete 500 tests a day. Whether we're doing 500 tests a day, I don't know, but we have to have that capability to move into phase 1.
Well, I would prefer that we were doing that capability, because we should be doing a lot more tests every day. And I'd like this to feel a little more urgent, that we were really gonna find them. And we keep hearing that we don't know the number of tests, and I think that would be very valuable. So the hospitals, I guess, know, but surely the labs and the U of O know how many tests. I mean, accounting must know, because each one costs money. And that's some figures I would like to know. How many tests are we really, really doing? Because how can we make decisions without real facts? I'm wondering, it sounds like the more vulnerable people are getting more cases. Do we have any statistics about that? What percentage?
So two things there. I think I heard questions. One is how many tests have we completed? And the answer is it's posted on the Lane County Public Health website, and we've completed over 6,300. I think we're at 6,345 as of this morning. So we do know those numbers. 6,344. Sorry, I was off. So we do get those numbers. Now that to get those numbers for the county, it's reliant on people on agencies reporting to them. So that's all the private labs, the hospitals, the Oregon Public Health Lab, et cetera. So we do know those numbers. The next question is in terms of the vulnerable population. I can't speak specifically to a particular population. What I do look at is the number of positive cases and the number of cases that we have that have recovered. And right now we only have 8 active positive cases in the county. As to how that breaks out, you could probably look at that on the website. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Are we testing in the jail?
I do not know. I'll find out.
Well, that's really important. It's another congregate living situation that people have no choice about. And if you can spread it asymptomatically and we're not testing everybody, this could be a real place of flare up. And then, probably not going to keep them 14 days in the jail. So it's going to come out of the jail. And I think it's really important, not just for the people who are in the jail, but for everybody. And yes, the nursing homes and the camps are important too. But I think that the jail needs to be a big priority. And I'd like us to get some more tests. If we're going to be coming out of our houses, we need to know what's happening. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Chris.
Thank you. I think what I'm hearing in the conversation, and I'm really kind of processing and agreeing with a lot of what I'm hearing is, what counselors would like to have is a way to go from the reactive testing system that we're currently using and figuring out a way to employ a more proactive testing system where we don't wait for someone to present to us. We actually go out, as some other countries have done, and proactively begin to test so that we can identify asymptomatic infected people and isolate them before they begin to start infecting others. So I think what would be good is if you could come back to us with information about what it would take, what we would need, and what we would need to authorize for you to have to begin a proactive testing regimen so that we could begin to identify and isolate infected people before they begin to present and before we're reacting. What would you need in order to do that? I think is what I'm hearing, and I can be supportive of.
I'm going to jump in here, Chris. We'll do some thinking. Catherine and I can put our heads together around what that would look like, because we're like, what you would need to do to kind of encourage the county to do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief, for that very helpful report. It's always wonderful to have you join us with these updates. And I have Betty raising a hand. We'll do one more and then we do need to move on to the next item. So Betty, go for it.
I had my hand up at the beginning, I guess.
I didn't see it before. I apologize.
My question is, when can we have real meetings instead of Zoom?
Can't hear you, Betty.
Betty, we will talk about that, but I'm, as we have said with everything else, the virus drives the deadline. And so as we look at the phase 1 and phase 2, we'll talk about the next meetings, but maybe we can bring that up. You and I can have that conversation. We can talk with the city manager about that and not take up a meeting time right now on that. Okay.
I don't know why not.
Well, we have 2 other items of business to discuss, and I just want to talk about that with more information. Okay.
Mayor, I didn't hear what it was Betty was trying to raise. I apologize.
She wants to talk about when we're going to have meetings in person.
And I don't know why.
Betty, move your microphone down to your mouth.
It is. That's why we need real meetings, so we can really talk,
Aha.
and so we can
Better.
really see each other and see what they're doing.
Not
I
for
don't
at
know
least
why
3
we
weeks.
can't talk about that when we've talked about people
Well,
have talked
all
about
right.
people have talked about the same thing over and over. But my other question is it safe? Is it possible to
3
drive to
weeks,
the
maybe
coast
more.
now?
Yeah.
That's a question.
Yeah, so it is not recommended right now that we visit our coastal communities. Even in phase one, limited unnecessary travel, and we need to stay within our regions and our local areas.
So you're telling me I can't go to Bandon?
Not recommended right now.
Thank you. Fine. That's all.
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
A quick question.
Okay.
That the chief's answer brings up an interesting point that I've always wanted to ask and never talked about. The governor's authority on this. He's saying it's not recommended, but there's a difference between not recommended and prohibited, and I'm wondering which one it is.
I think we should get back to you on this. Sorry for those dreaded words, but I know we have some information on what the governor's authority is under this, and I just want to be able to review that with Catherine, and we can send it out to the group.
Yeah, I'd be real interested in following up on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all. I'm sorry to close this in, but we have 2 other items on the agenda, and I want to make sure we get to those. So thank you very much, Chief, once again. And with that, we'll go on to the next item, which is a work session and action on the Broadway and Hilyard property disposition deal points. Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. This was postponed from several weeks ago, and I believe we're just going to start with Amanda D'Souza. She has a really short presentation.
Yes, hi, councilors and mayor. I have a short presentation. Hopefully you should be able to see the screen. So today I am here to present deal points on a city-owned property located at Broadway and Hilyard. The site we're talking about is located at the northeast corner of the Broadway-Hilyard intersection. The map on your screen is an attachment A in your packet. The site is immediately adjacent to the 66 Motel to the north, across from Cafe Yum to the south, and kitty corner from Elkhorn Cidery. The site is 0.19 acres and is currently vacant and undeveloped. It's a remnant of properties the city purchased in 2007 to use for transportation infrastructure improvements. The site is very constrained given its size and location. For example, no ingress or egress is allowed from the site itself. The deal points we are presenting today are for the sale of the property to Tom Connor, who owns the adjacent 66 Motel circled here. I'll give a quick recap of how we got here. As a reminder, a few years ago, council directed staff to issue requests for proposals for 2 city-owned sites near the downtown riverfront, one of which was the Broadway and Hilyard property. We received 2 proposals, and council directed us to negotiate deal points with Mr. Connor, owner of the adjacent motel shown here in green. At the time, Mr. Connor proposed integrating the city's property with the motel, creating an outdoor social hub that would complement planned renovations of the motel. Mr. Connor also had a grander vision of consolidating the property to the west of the motel, shown here in orange, in order to create a larger mixed-use development. The orange property is owned by the same trust as the land in green, which Mr. Connor leases for the motel. Both we and Mr. Connor were very interested in being able to achieve that grander vision, so we provided Mr. Connor with the flexibility and time to explore that option. Due to the nature of the ownership of those green and orange properties, it took a while for Mr. Connor to make contact with members of the trust, and he was ultimately unable to move forward with that vision. We also spent some time exploring a potential partnership with Mr. Connor to use the city property and motel land to provide needed parking for the riverfront before ultimately settling on pursuing other possible solutions. So the proposed deal points for this sale are included in attachment B in your packet, and I'll go over some of the highlights. Given its prominent location near the riverfront, our priority for the deal was to produce an outcome that turns the site from an eyesore into an entranceway. Under these deal points, Mr. Connor would purchase the city property for $90,000. Mr. Connor has also agreed to provide an easement on his motel wall, allowing for a mural to be painted as a culmination of the 20 by 21 program. This would include all of the walls shown in this photo, both adjacent to the city-owned property and the walls along Hilyard. With its location between downtown and the U of O, on a major thoroughfare with 30,000 vehicles driving by per day, and as the gateway to the downtown riverfront, Cultural Services is excited at the possibility of this location serving as a sort of a finish line for the 20 by 21 mural initiative. While they won't start a curation process until the easement is secured, the hope is that this mural can be a collaborative effort with local and global artists. Mr. Connor agrees to secure the property and make improvements no later than June of 2021. At a minimum, this will include removal of the fence, which Mr. Connor has already indicated he'd like to do as soon as possible, and maintenance of the site. And this would also include providing access to the wall for the mural. The city will get the opportunity to review any design plans he has for the city property. And finally, as Mr. Connor indicated in his proposal, he intends to renovate and update the motel. As part of this plan, he'll explore the possibility of connecting the city property to enhance the motel renovations. Staff's recommendation is sale of the property based on the proposed deal points. As the owner of the adjacent motel, Mr. Connor will be motivated to upkeep the site and would utilize it to enhance his motel and vice versa. The site is odd and has a number of constraints that limit its potential. Improvements to the site combined with the remodel of the motel lends itself to the best use of the site as it accommodates the limited access and would result in aesthetic and pedestrian-friendly enhancements. Should council approve the deal points today, staff will move forward with the property sale. In regard to the mural, the 20 by 21 committee will follow their standard curation process and coordinate the recruitment of artists. And with that, I'm here, as well as Michael Kinnison, to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. And I have Alan and then Mike in the queue. So Alan, kick it off.
Sure. I sent an email earlier to council and staff. Hopefully they got it and were able to respond to this. I really like the vision and the plan for this. I think it'd be a great add to the community. I really like the mural idea. If the vision got built, that would be great. But the track record of folks buying properties, surplus properties from the city, and then actually following through with their plans is really, really poor. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but I don't believe anybody who's done it through this type of process has actually done what they said they were going to do. That's the small parcel sales and the alley vacations and things like that. I believe that's because in the terms of the sale, we don't require them to do anything. We don't require them to actually perform and fulfill the vision. It's just an investigation of the vision. So we're basically selling them the property, and they could do whatever they want with it forever and not do anything and not have anything to do with the vision that they put forth or the proposals. So I'm kind of wondering why we even go through that process. If we're not going to add a provision in the terms of the sale that says if you don't perform on this within a certain period of time or begin construction by a certain period of time, it reverts back to the city, then let's just not do the process that we do. I mean, it's kind of a big giant waste of everybody's time if it doesn't get fulfilled through a requirement in the contracts. We could just have the properties just sell to the highest bidder.
So Councilor Zelenka, I could try to address that. We could add a provision to the terms for a repurchase of this property if council thought that was important. I think from our perspective, this site is so constrained, it's hard to imagine that anybody else is going to be interested in making any improvements there. When we ran the RFP process, the only other proposal we had was for a digital billboard there, and I don't think anyone thought that was a good would be a good end result there. I think what we are guaranteeing that we're going to get out of this is a world-class mural on a really important corner and entryway into the riverfront. We're going to have a property owner that's invested in keeping that piece of property safe and clean and maintained, something that we have struggled with. And, you know, in terms of repurchase right, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure that we can guarantee what eventually, other than those improvements, would happen on the property. And if we were to repurchase it, exactly what we might do with it. I think there's a lot of incentive for Mr. Connor to incorporate that property into his rebranding and redevelopment of the motel. We feel confident that he's got a lot of incentive to focus on that property. He's currently working on improving one of his hotels across from Matt Knight. And with all the activity with the Knight campus, Hayward Field investments, the Riverfront, it just makes sense for him to continue to look at his other properties there and make those improvements. So there are no guarantees, you're correct. But I'm not sure that we could really do anything with this odd little piece of property to guarantee what ultimately will happen there on the rest of the property, other than maintaining it, cleaning it up, and having a mural on those kind of imposing blank walls all along that corner.
So 2 questions. One, am I correct that none of the folks that we've done similar types of processes with have fulfilled their visions?
To be honest with you, I don't know what that list is, so I really need time to go back and look at what all those properties are. So I'm not sure. I really couldn't answer that right now.
Yeah, we got proposals for alley vacations to improve them and other kinds of properties, and nobody ever did anything. So it might be a little bit too late for this particular project, but if we were to stipulate at the beginning that the proposal will have a timeline on it to be then where it reverts back to the city, people put together a proposal that actually that they have confidence in that they would be able to do. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to bid on it. So it's the way that we do this process that's bothersome to me. It doesn't result in anything other than a bunch of people telling us some cool ideas that may or may not happen. If track record holds, won't happen. I like the mural idea and you know, taking down the fence and clearing out the weeds, but I'm not sure we're in the future. I don't like this process. I think it's not a good use of our time. It takes a hell of a lot of time for staff to go through this and ours to review it, and them to pay for it and do it. So it just seems like a process that is a lot of make work for not a lot of results.
Okay, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Remind me again, Michael, when did we buy this?
We purchased it in 2006, 2007 as part of the transportation improvements.
Right, which we didn't do. Actually, let me ask that question better. Why didn't we use it for the purpose we intended?
We did. We did use parts of the tax lots to make those improvements where Broadway turns into Hilyard. So we used what we needed, and then we took out some of the right of way, and these are just remnants of the tax lots. So the tax lots were much bigger than they are now.
I understand what you're saying. I was trying to make a larger point. That sometimes the plans change, and that happens to everybody. And I have to say that what is planned occurs or not, it's already in horrible shape. It's not being maintained well, and I would say that those offering to purchase it have motivation in their operation of their business to certainly make it look better than we have at the entrance to our city. So I'm in favor of it for that reason, but also because essentially we did offer to sell it to the highest bidder, and this is the one that came in with the best proposal for something to do with it. So I'm in favor of it because I think the net result will be the city gets more money for something we're not using and we don't want, and it gets better looking at the entrance to our city. It just makes sense.
Hey, thank you. Chris.
So Mike kind of asked the first question I was going to ask, which is how long have we owned the site? And so it's been over 10 years we've owned the site. And we made some improvements on it, but otherwise it's just been sitting there and we've not done anything with it. in 10 years, other than build a piece of road on it. So I think the notion of somebody needs to do something with the site, the city could be painted with that same brush. We haven't done anything with it. So I know Tom Connor. I know the kinds of things that he's done. I know when Tom wants to do something, he generally does it. So it's kind of like Rob Bennett. I have high faith in him. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. And Tom Connor's the same way. Did we have to do a vacation of some sort, I think an alley vacation, in order for Whole Foods to be able to be built? I believe we did an alley vacation for the Whole Foods project, and that got built.
I think that's correct.
I believe we had to do vacations for the OB project at 5th Street, and that project is being built. The Broadway, the Woolworth building next to the Broadway Commerce building was a pit for years and years and years, and we sold the building and it got built. So there's actually been a number of projects where we have sold property and made vacations. Matt Knight Arena required us to make some vacations in order to get built. So we don't have a terrible batting average. Sometimes we'll grant something and it doesn't happen. Other times we grant something and it does happen. So in that case, it's really a matter of if the city's going to be involved in property and development. Sometimes it's riskier than others, but I think our batting average is in pretty good. And since I am confident in Tom, he owns the property or has control of the property next to it. He has a plan to work with it. We're going to get $90,000 that we otherwise don't have, and he'll make some improvements to the property. And so while I'm not opposed to a right of first refusal if he fails to build the project, and we can talk about what that might look like, I don't want to say the city has done a poor job of managing its land sales and development prospects, because like any other thing, it has risk associated with it, and oftentimes that risk pays off. Whole Foods, OB, Matt Knight Arena, other developments, we've granted an easement so that the shed can expand. I'm confident that that project will take place once we get through all of the different things. So I'm supportive of this project. I think it's got a lot of promise, and as we've said, the vision looks really good. I'm comfortable taking the risk to see if that vision will pay off.
Okay, Claire.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I'm in support of the deal points as they're written today. A mural at this site will be a significant improvement in how this area looks. That big blank large space is really unattractive as it is now and has been for many years. So that's exciting to have that as part of the plans. I will just comment, it's a shame that he wasn't able to secure that other property to the west, and it looks like it's being held by a family trust, and that means it could remain vacant and undeveloped for years to come, which is really frustrating considering that's a major commercial corridor and we're going to eventually do improvements along Franklin. So I hope that situation can resolve itself at some point before, the next 25 years. I was going to make some of the same points as Chris about some of my recollection on some successful, disposition of city property. I was thinking of the alley vacation by the jail, which was not a groovy project. It was a security project for that development off of 5th, and they followed through on their plan after we granted them that alley vacation. And I just don't see any value in us holding on to this parcel. I think, kind of as Mike pointed out, by selling it, we offload a burden that we currently carry and gain a small piece of taxable property. And if the new owner is able to fulfill his vision, then the value of that property is going to increase, as will the land nearby. So that seems like a bunch of net positives in my view. Just a couple of niggly notes. Amanda, in your presentation, you said the property has no egress from it, but that's just referring to vehicles, right? It's got good pedestrian access.
Correct.
Yeah. And then the plans call for him to create an entrance for vehicles so he can have food trucks through the motel parking lot. Is that correct?
I think his hope during the remodel is to, there's a shared wall that goes into his office, is that to remove that, so that would create some access. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So yeah, I think this is a good proposal. I'm excited that we're following through on it. So thanks very much.
Okay, Alan, you still have your hand raised. I do want to wrap this up with a vote because we have another issue on which I know you also have a lot to say. So brief comment, go for it, but let's try and wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll vote for the proposal, but my comments weren't about this project nor the improvements. I hope they all get built. I drive by that every day on my way to work, so I hope it all gets done. My comments were about the future projects, and if we could look at some way to make the process that we make people go through and the review process that we have some more teeth in it, so that actually has some meaning other than just some nice drawings that may or may not happen. The projects I was specifically talking about were not the ones that had big, large, already preordained projects in them, like Whole Foods or Matt Night Arena or the OB projects. It was the smaller ones. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Emily, you want to put the motion on the table? You're muted still.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Just for a sense of history, this was the location of Hoopville, which started out being a decent place for homeless people to have a place to sleep. It deteriorated, as many of our homeless sheltering places do. And I understand it's an entrance to the city. $90,000 is a lot of money, but just want to point out that we can't find any place to shelter people. We're making an assumption, I think, that a shelter would be ugly. Certainly it would be better than those walls. So I just want to put it out there that we don't have a place, we need places for people to go. And we're going to sell this. I don't really know who else would want to buy it unless we used it. For something that might happen in the future. And yes, it would make more money if it was developed. But let's keep in mind that we are giving up something that we're also looking for. So that's my comment. I move to authorize the city manager to sell the parcel identified in attachment A to Budgetel Inns of Oregon, Inc., consistent with the terms included in attachment B.
Jennifer, can you second, please?
Oh, I thought I did. Maybe it was on mute. Second.
All right. All in favor, please raise your hand in real or virtually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you very much. That passes. Thank you, staff. Appreciate that report and comments. And now we'll move on to the downtown Riverfront Phase 1 infrastructure conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe we have a couple people presenting today, and Denny Bro is going to kick us off.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Councilors. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. We have a lot of information to cover. I know we're a little short on time, but this is a follow-up work session and we had a public hearing as well on a proposal for Phase 1 infrastructure. This was a supplemental budget item request. It was pretty clear at that last work session that Council had a lot of questions about this phasing infrastructure, including the financing and the timing. This is a very complicated project. We live and breathe this project every day, and from our perspective, it's complicated. So we understand why you would have lots of questions about that. So we're going to try to answer some of those today. Because there's always been some level of uncertainty regarding the timing of Williams and Dames either purchasing the property or making their non-refundable deposit, relative to the timing of the park construction and the infrastructure, we had proposed to council that we have an alternate plan, and that would allow at least part of the infrastructure needed to serve the park to move forward. and that we would have a plan to do that within the capacity of our existing resources. And so we knew that it would be really, really important to propose a plan that didn't, for example, put the general fund at risk, which I think we have done that. As we discussed at the last work session, we're still actively working with Williams and Dame. As you know, some of the timing contingencies in our development agreement couldn't be met. The biggest one really that we've discussed is the BOLI determination. That really impacted the ideal scenario, which would have been for us to have received a non-refundable deposit before we move forward with the full infrastructure package. But that opportunity is basically passed at this point. So we're proposing an alternative path. However, we're not at all suggesting that we won't be successful with Williams and Dame, at least getting them to the finish line. In fact, they've made a significant investment at this point, and we don't see them really walking away from this project easily. So we're very optimistic going forward with Williams and Dame at this point. We know we have to have an alternative plan. We've agreed to some updated deal points with Williams and Dame, which we'll consider on May 26th, and if approved, we expect to have an updated development agreement signed in June. And the three biggest hurdles after the signing of that development agreement that would really remain before they actually close on the property will be the BOLI determination, getting their investors committed or recommitted to the project, and then ultimately completing the infrastructure were all precursors to them closing on the property. The deal points, they really haven't changed much. They propose a minimum and maximum number of units and floors for each partial, which is basically reflects the two different concept plans that council had previously approved. The things that you'll see that have changed are removal of the local improvement district in exchange for a higher purchase price, which ultimately just covers Williams and Dame's share of the infrastructure costs. There's a proposal to allow some flexibility in which parcel would be developed for affordable housing. And there's some timing changes related to some of the setbacks that we've had over the past few months. So we know that even more so than before, we're working within an environment that has some uncertainties. However, our focus continues to be to deliver on the community's long-held vision to redevelop the riverfront. And over the past couple of years, I think we've made significant progress getting there. The conditions and the deal points, as you know, they have obviously changed along the way. They might continue to do so as we move forward, particularly as we navigate through issues like the BOLI determination. So we'll continue to work with council to make sure we're making the right decisions at the right time with the appropriate safeguards in place. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt and Emily, and they're going to respond to some of the questions from the last meeting and provide a little bit more detail on the phase one infrastructure.
So good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Matt Rodriguez, the Acting Public Works Director. I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the phase one infrastructure package and provide information about the merits of moving forward with construction on the project now or waiting to do it later. This slide shows an aerial photo of the Riverfront development site, and just to orient with my pointer, if you can see it, I'm going to show you the eWeb headquarters, Fifth Street Market, and the steam plant to just give you an idea. The Riverfront Park and Plaza are shown in green, the park being predominantly along the riverbank edge and the plaza coming into the site. And the phase one infrastructure that we're talking about today is shown in red. The pale orange that's come up is what we're proposing as phase two of the Riverfront infrastructure that would connect down to the steam plant and the southern access. As Denny discussed, the Riverfront development projects continue to move forward with some adjustments along the way. To date, we've completed site clearing and grading and riverfront planning. This work prepared the site for construction of the park, which started earlier this month, and construction of phase one of the street and utility infrastructure we're discussing today. The phase one infrastructure project was advertised to bid in March of this year, opened bids on April 9th, and then, as Denny said, held a public hearing for supplemental budget 2 actions on the 27th of April. And we have action on these proposed SB2 items scheduled for your consideration this coming Monday, May 18th. If approved, the phase one infrastructure project would start construction in June and is scheduled to be complete in December ahead of the Riverfront Park opening in the spring. Next, I'm going to talk about the merits of moving forward with construction of the Phase 1 infrastructure project now and the merits of electing to wait. Emily and Denny will expand on many of these points in more detail. So why construct the project now? I think first, we believe this is the right plan for the development. After years of work refining the development plan for the site, including public outreach, planning commission, and city council approvals, a design has been created that integrates the parcels with the park, plaza, and public infrastructure and sets the table for vertical development. The Phase 1 infrastructure also provides streets and utilities to access the park and the parcels, provides 77 on-street parking spaces, which will generate revenue, and basically makes parcels, and the parcels in gray, so 3, 6, 7, and 8 development ready. Parcels 1 and 2 in yellow do not need any additional infrastructure to be ready. They're on the north side of 4th Avenue. Moving forward now also takes advantage of the favorable low bid we received, which was more than $900,000 under the estimate. And in addition, this $6 million construction project will provide local economic stimulus and jobs in a time when we need them. This project basically equates to about 65 year-long jobs that will be created. So why later? Obviously, with COVID-19, the future of the economy is in question, and the potential for recession and uncertainty could delay development of the parcels. Williams and Dame may elect not to purchase property, which would delay recovery of infrastructure costs that could be used for other investments. The urban renewal funds in the Riverfront district could be used for projects elsewhere in the district. And lastly, changes to the master plan or infrastructure plan could be implemented if desired. However, as I mentioned earlier, we think this is the right plan, and any changes would be a lengthy and expensive process. Now I'm going to hand it over to Emily to talk about design integration and the relationship between Phase 1 infrastructure and the Riverfront Park.
Can everybody hear me? Great, thanks. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to be back to talk more about the downtown Riverfront Park. So I think if we zoom out and we start to talk about the urban design of this new neighborhood, we know that all of these elements work together. So streets and building lots and parks and open spaces, they all work together to create this new vision. And I think most importantly, they work together as a whole to connect, the neighborhood within itself, but then outside of the new neighborhood as well. So, before the master plan was re-envisioned, I think we've always had a value on view corridors and really connecting the river to the city and the city to the river. And I think, the Williams and Dame plan did that by aligning streets with blocks a little more than the previous version was. And so I think, and then another thing that happened, with this re-envisioning was to really centralize all of the open space together into one kind of plaza area that fully fronts on the park and kind of seamlessly integrates with it. So this is all to say that I think it really works as a whole, and it's really important to think about that holistically inside and outside of the development when we're having these discussions. Next slide, please, Matt. So from a project phasing standpoint, the park has always been the first for design and implementation, and it sets the stage for the plaza and the buildings and public access. And I think, so we've, obviously completed the bank enhancement portion of the project. So we laid back the bank, relocated a bunch of utilities, and then replanted them. The image you're seeing here is the bank is blooming and it's beautiful. And so now, as most of you know, we are moving forward into the full development and construction of the development part of the park. And we've always, pursued this park construction, and it's solidly based on the assumption that the minimum of the first phase of infrastructure would be constructed along with it. And again, the park site, the park development site, and the infrastructure are, sort of critically connected. Next slide, please, Matt. So phase one infrastructure brings critical public access to the park. So without streets, we're really pretty landlocked in this site outside of access from the north and the south from the bike path. And so that would make it without the streets, I think we'd have a hard time bringing people down to the river in the way that we envision. And so I think parking and specifically ADA access to the site is going to be a very, very important part of developing this piece of infrastructure. Emergency access, emergency vehicle access. So, you know, the entire time that we have been talking about the Riverfront Park and how it would be fronted by the development, we've always envisioned a road being there for both maintenance and emergency vehicle access. And this loop creates a critical access for the emergency vehicles to access and then drive back out of the site without backing out. Critical utility connections, so power, water, we'll have a restroom on the site. We need sanitary to serve the park restroom. And then park maintenance and operations. So we will be maintaining this site heavily. I think we'll be here at least twice a day. We may have a fairly consistent presence on this site. It's going to be the crown jewel of parks in our community. It will be one of the most visited sites in our community. It needs to look beautiful all of the time. And we need several access points within which to do that and protect users at the same time with vehicle work. I think the last thing and likely the most important is when I talk to people about this project, they know that I'm working on it and they're extraordinarily excited. This community is so excited about this project. And then they ask me, how are you going to keep it safe? And I've been able to say, hey, we have this levy, we have new police officers, we have additional park enforcement, funding. It's really great. But all of that is predicated on very clear access from a right-of-way. And so we know when, there's kind of three legs to the stool of keeping a park safe, and that one is design, which we've done. We have a very open design programming. So we intend on programming events in this first phase of work. And so you must be able to access the site with vehicles to allow for that programming and events. And lastly is enforcement. I think, we're going to need police vehicle access to the site from in other ways than just the bike path. And so I think to really deliver what the community is imagining here and, giving them a clear way to come down and access and be in this new space, the infrastructure component is very integral to the development of the Downtown Riverfront Park. And I think from here, I'll turn it over to Denny to provide some more information.
Thank you, Emily. So Councilors Link sent out several good questions in an email last night, and I thought it would be good to take some extra time to walk through those, because I think they're really important considerations for council, and I'm assuming they're going to come up in the discussion. So I just want to capture those questions and respond to them real quickly. The first question was around if we aren't successful amending our development agreement with Williams & Dame, how do we go about accomplishing the goals of the master plan, and what experience do we have? If we move forward with the phase one infrastructure, basically what we'll have created is what I would call shovel-ready development sites. I would say it's in a prime location on the river next to our new park. And with that infrastructure our goal would be to sell individual or multiple lots. Hopefully that's the Williams & Dame, but in the worst case scenario, could be two others. There was also some questions about who would play the role of master developer if Williams & Dame wasn't around anymore. I would say that the master developer's role really is to do the horizontal and development. And from my perspective, that work is mostly done. We've purchased the property, we have a concept design, we've created a subdivision, we've codified the design concept, we've designed and financed and bid out the park, we've designed the street utilities, we've designed the quiet zone crossings, for years we've vetted various density and use scenarios, and so I think we have a pretty good idea of the quality and the density and the mix of uses we're hoping for in the site. So I would say we're not at the master planning phase anymore. We're basically at the implementation stage at this point. Regarding our experience doing this kind of work successfully, and this kind of goes to Councilor Zlinka's question earlier in the last work session item, Besides all the work that we've done on this site, what I actually think is worth mentioning, because we've done a lot of successful work on this site thus far, we've done a lot of redevelopment work, buying, selling, redeveloping property. And I think the outcomes have been generally positive, mostly because we play the role of master developer in those projects, meaning that we control the desired outcomes when we own and sell property ourselves. So some examples would be the Tate condominiums, the Broadway Commerce Center, the Woolworth Building, West Town on 8th, the downtown campus, Broadway Place, the US Bank Building. All of those were projects that are properties that we over time bought and sold and kind of acted as the redeveloper. Master redeveloper. More relevant and near the riverfront, we were the master developer for the Agripac property, if you recall. We purchased that property, we demolished that property, we rebuilt the street network on the site, we sold to the federal government for the courthouse and the Northwest Community Credit Union for the headquarters property. Arguably, I think all of these projects are some of the best and most successful projects that we've seen develop downtown. So using Councilor Pryor's analogy, I think our batting average is actually pretty good when we do this kind of work. The second question was around what would be the rate and pattern of development look like, especially given the current economic conditions? And then would the infrastructure build out limit the flexibility for other smaller developers later down the line? Again, I assume this means if Williams and Dame doesn't do the work. Williams and Dame was expecting, or they are still expecting, to build at a pace of about one product or one building each year, maybe two initially, but really I think our expectation would be, and we would be happy to see one product come out of the ground every year. And I think that would be the best case scenario, whether we would be working with Williams and Dame or a different developer at this point. The pattern of the development is really informed by the subdivision that we've already created, the codified neighborhood plan. As Emily mentioned, Williams and Dame's concept tries to replicate a downtown city block kind of fabric. And so the actual concept plan that we're currently working with allows a lot more flexibility for future development. The original master plan had curved streets and odd shaped lots and all those things. And if we were still there, I would have more concerns about the flexibility. You know, lot 3, for example, can be broken into quarter blocks and adjust to the scale of development and so forth. The next question was about, you know, in the absence again of Williams and Dame, how would we get the first developers on board and willing to invest, and would we be offering any incentives? Having the infrastructure built would make these sites more desirable and more development ready. And I think one of the biggest obstacles for most development is time and certainty. And I think those will be tremendously valuable for Williams and Dame as they go forward, or any other developer as they go forward. So if the infrastructure is delayed, for example, I think that creates some uncertainty, not only for Williams and Dame, and I believe that it would push their project back, because they don't intend to purchase the property until we have completed the infrastructure. And it would create uncertainty for any other developers if they weren't sure whether the infrastructure, when and how it was going to be done. We also have some advantages building off the Fifth Street Market momentum, the Riverfront Park momentum. I think there would be interest in this property. Regarding incentives, the Riverfront area actually has more incentives than other parts of the city and other areas, including Opportunity Zone, Urban Renewal, and MUPTI, which aren't available citywide. There was a question about, will existing urban renewal funds be sufficient to pay off the debt and without extending the life of the district? And the answer there is yes. We will need to sell property in the future to pay back the public works part of this transaction, the interfund loan, $2 million, but that's more patient funds. We have a 10-year window to do that, but we expect to do it sooner. There's also a question about the value of the lots and how many lots we would need to sell. Just to give you a sense of scale, all the lots combined have a value of about, let's say, $12 million if you use a conservative $30 a square foot number, assuming the infrastructure is in. The larger lots, 3A, B, and C together have a value of about $3 million. Lots 7, 9, and 10 each have a value of about $2 million. So that gives you kind of a sense of scale. The final question was around what opportunities would be foregone if we utilize urban resources now for the phase one infrastructure. And I would answer that by saying none at this point. The opportunities in the Riverfront project area beyond the Williams and Dame development are really the steam plant, the plaza, and affordable housing, as we've discussed in the past. And if we shift the focus outside of the Riverfront development area, these things would remain unfinished, I think, obviously. If we use the resources, for example, for the steam plant or the plaza first, those wouldn't actually generate any revenue to support infrastructure. So the plaza and the steam plant don't work without the infrastructure. So it kind of feels like the infrastructure leads those other projects. I'm sure you're going to have other questions. Again, we're not asking for you to approve the supplemental budget request today. We'll be back on the 18th and then back on the 26th for the Williams and Dame deal points and for you to approve the borrowing resolution required for the urban renewal project funding. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. I have 3 counselors in the queue, Mike and Alan, then Claire, and I'm hoping you can each be fairly succinct because, and respect each other. And Emily, see you there. Okay, so Mike, take it away.
We always?
Yeah.
Thank you, Denny and Emily for the presentation. I appreciate that very much. Well done. Emily, you said something during your presentation that was really interesting to me, and I know all the work that's gone into this. You said that the park, once constructed, will be the most popular and the most visited place or park in our area. I don't disagree with you. I think it looks beautiful and I can't wait. But is that something you gathered from public involvement, or is that what you hope will take place, or based on the research you've done?
I can't say that I've counted the number of people, but you know, from the public outreach that we've received and you know, from the international events that are arriving here. I mean, I think, you know, our original schedule push was really around getting it done by 2021. I think it's adjacency to downtown, all the good things. I think you know them, Mike, but I think it will be one of the most visited parks in Eugene. And mostly that's, you know, because it's on the river and a bit central location. So I don't have numbers to back me up. I'm just, you know, I'm a supporter.
I totally get it. And I would tend to agree with you too. I think that makes complete sense that would be. So my next question for Denny, I think, is around access. If this is going to be the most visited place as far as the park goes, and we're going to see that much traffic, does this plan give us completely adequate access to that area, or is access still constrained in some way?
It sounds like that's an access transportation kind of question, but maybe Matt, you can help with that.
Can you just a little more detail about comparatively the access required and the access that this will give us with this particular infrastructure?
This is Matt. So I don't have numbers in front of me about what the projected, you know, visitation of the park would require in parking spots. We do know that this phase one has 77 parking spots that are on street, so it starts to allow some amount of folks to come down, park and visit the park.
Yeah.
As we go through phase two, additional parking spaces on street would be created, and then we're still exploring some potential to create a parking area at the near the southern entrance to the site, kind of upstream of the steam plant.
But you expect that this new infrastructure will make getting in and out of the riverfront area a great deal easier, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we built this plan thinking not only about the park, but the parcels and being able to support development of those parcels that we name. That's why we built basically a circulation route that will work not only for people visiting the park, but for trucking or other larger vehicles that would need to come into the site for construction and deliveries.
Buses, fire engines, everything, right? Mm-hmm. And that connects to the eWeb portion as well, to the admin building?
If I remember correctly, I don't think we have a direct connection with the admin building in.
But it opens up access, yes?
But it does allow them access to the backside of the eWeb admin building, which they want. And then eventually we'll have another street, you know, someday in the future that would go north-south right in front of the entrance to the eWeb headquarters.
Thank you very much. That's what I was hoping to hear. Secondarily then, and lastly, I guess, Jenny, you mentioned several phasings and different parcels being developed in different years. When do you see the commercial aspect, the restaurants or shops or other places the public can go that isn't housing being developed on that side?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Councilor Clark. The, you know, there is a kind of, there is a parcel right on the river, right along the 5th Street extension for a restaurant. And we wouldn't lead with that. And I don't think Williams and Dame's intent would be to lead with that because you need the density around that restaurant. So, you know, my guess is they would have probably built a couple of the larger projects first. And so the restaurant was probably initially, you know, maybe 3 years out. And so we're probably still at a 3 years out, best case scenario. It could be longer. The steam plant is the other, what I would just consider major kind of community gathering spot. And again, you know, the steam plant is going to be delayed as well. And so, and given the COVID uncertainties in the economy and all that, it's hard to see where that might be going right now. But that we want to try to make the steam plant happen as well, because then you have a 5th Street connection to that commercial retail activity, and you have an 8th Street connection.
Okay.
So there's 2 nodes kind of on both ends of the development site.
But all this first phase infrastructure serves all of that development. Is that correct?
Not necessarily the steam plant, but the north end of the site around 5th Street and the restaurant site. And yes, the restaurant site definitely.
Thank you very much.
Alan, and then Claire, and then Emily.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation, staff, Danny and Matt and others and Emily, for addressed many of my concerns and answered many of my questions. So thank you for that. But what I wanted to be clear, that, and I've said it before, I really like the vision and the development of the Riverfront property. I got really excited when we brought in a very experienced developer on board to be our development partner. And I really like the park. I think it's gonna be a great asset to our community. But my problem continues to be around the recent changes that we've seen in this project that have fundamentally shifted how we get this project done, which in turn has substantially changed the risk, the timing, and the potential of what gets built. So the council has really talked about this new way of doing business very much, and the new rules and the risks there are here. And so I appreciate the conversation. We were going from a development structure that had us moving along in parallel lines with the developer in a cost-sharing partnership, and with a single developer building the whole thing. Now we're considering a change if Williams and Dame doesn't come through, to a very different structure model where the city's acting alone, building and paying for the infrastructure, acting as the general contractor, and to partner with multiple developers to build potentially single parts of the overall master plan. So we've essentially shifted from building a very cool vision with a partner, experienced partner, to one that is build it and we'll hope they'll come model with the city acting as the general contractor. And that makes me nervous. And the new model is significantly different from the path that we're on, with a great more risk and work by the city. So my real question is, I don't understand why we don't just stick with plan A and wait to pull the trigger on the infrastructure until that part of the plan has some certainty, i.e., that we have a deal with Williams and Dame. I'm unclear about that. Maybe the staff could address that issue. And then finally on the park, we seem to be shifting. I really like the park, but we seem to be shifting gears in having the park be the driver for this development. And it was the other way around. The development drove the park. We would not have built the park had we not had the development part of this. To have now the park drive this multi-million-dollar infrastructure seems a little odd and a big change for me. And even though part of the park structure is irrevocably contracted for, I don't agree that it should be the justification for this multi-million-dollar investment. And I also don't agree that there's no access to the park. There's parking lots that we own on 4th and Mill that are half a block away from this park that give us access, that will give ample access beside the bike paths on either side of it. So I think that that part of it doesn't kind of ring as being very persuasive to me. But maybe staff could address the why don't we wait for the Williams and Dame deal.
Yeah, I'll start with the Williams and Dame question. You know, there's always been uncertainty with Williams and Dame. Even when we had the development agreement signed, there were lots of contingencies in there that we have to work through, one of which was building the infrastructure. You know, we're likely to sign a development agreement in June with Williams and Dame. You know, those deal points are coming to council, and assuming you approve them, our both parties' full intent is to sign the development agreement. You know, we're going to be at the same place we were before. We're going to have a development agreement, and there's still going to be some questions and some contingencies moving forward. And I've talked about some of those. One is, you know, BOLI issues and getting their investors on board, and us building infrastructure. That will be a contingency, as you'll see in the development agreement. Is they don't want to buy property until they're ready to build. They don't want to buy and then hope we build infrastructure. They want to buy and start construction immediately when they buy the property. So if we delay, I think the answer to if we delay, basically then Williams and Dame delays. They won't be ready to move forward until we get the infrastructure built. So I think that's an important consideration. And I would just say that I think we share that we really want to work with Williams and Dame. Councilor Zinke, I've heard you say that before. We've looked at their work. I think their vision and their concept for this has improved this site dramatically. We have no hopes that we're going to lose them. And we're going to keep working through all the issues. But we have to have a plan B, because if they do walk away, we want to make sure we don't put the city at risk. So I think we share that. And I think we are proceeding with caution. It's not the ideal plan, but this is not the ideal scenario. It's a complicated project. We have some economic uncertainty now, but I think we're doing the things to keep the project moving. Because I think, you know, I always say time kills a lot of deals. And if we just wait, there's a chance that our odds with Williams and Dave go down, they don't go up.
All right, Claire.
Thank you. I'll be very brief and keep my broader comments for a work session where we're actually considering the motion. I'll just say, overall, I believe the pros outweigh the cons in terms of moving forward on the infrastructure. And for me right now, the negatives outweigh the benefits of not doing so. And I'll speak to that more specifically when we're at a work session with a motion before us.
Thank you. And Emily.
Thank you. I like this project, even though it's changed and even though I want the open space. A lot of cities have views down to their river, and it is an asset that right now you can't access. It has things we need right now, when, you know, the jobs, and we need housing and low income housing, and it's always location for everything. And we always knew Williams and Dame might bail. My big question is, how much of this investment, if we decided not to go forward, would be available for recovery projects? Because if it wouldn't be available, we might as well go ahead and do this. Quick answer.
If the question is, if we don't spend this urban renewal resource on infrastructure, how would we use it in other places to recover? These are near shovel ready opportunities on the riverfront. So we would have to try to find some other projects that are ready within the Riverfront Urban Renewal District. You know, we could probably start, looking at property and trying to figure out how to get redevelopment done, but those things take time. This project has taken time to get to where we are. So we don't really see any opportunities that are at our doorsteps, I guess, in the Riverfront district besides this one at this moment.
And that's what I needed to know, because that's the pushback I'm going to get is how can you build new infrastructure when we need these other jobs? But, you know, if I can't use that urban renewal money to do some of the other projects I think are going to be imminent. And this has a lot of advantages to it. Here's another question. While we're doing this infrastructure and the land where we're hoping to sell to Williams and Dame is empty, could we use that for some temporary campsites? We own it still, it's available, it's not near a residence. I think that's something to seriously consider. Thanks.
Yeah, that's probably a legal question because of the property zoning, and it would take some legal and council action, I'm assuming, but I'll leave that to Catherine.
We like to leave all the fun things for Catherine. I just wanted to quickly clarify, we'll make sure that by the time you have the next work session and action on this, we can clarify. I have a strong recollection that when we signed the MOU with eWeb to purchase the park, that we had a set timeline by which we were to start construction. I think it was 5 years, but I want to make sure of that date, and we'll just include that in the next AIS.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It was very, very helpful and informative. And I appreciate Alan submitting those questions and Denny being prepared to just answer them right off the top. That was incredibly helpful. And I would just say one final thing before we close, which is this is a recovery project. I mean, this is jobs and public investment that's going to spur other public investment. And so, you know, I see this as part of our economic recovery from this economic crisis. So I think we should be grateful that we're in a position to actually move forward on something that does create jobs and does show investment and confidence in the future. So thank you all for this conversation. We actually managed with only
Betty wanted to speak.
Oh, who did? Did I admit, Betty, were you raising your hand?
A long time ago.
I'm sorry. You know, for some reason, I never am looking at the moment you're raising your hand.
I'm getting tired of being ignored, actually.
I'm not intentionally ignoring you. I just keep looking at you.
Teacher had to raise her hand.
Use the raise your hand button, Betty.
I raised it, I waved it, I did all kinds of things.
No, the electronic one.
I don't have an electronic hand.
Take it away, Betty. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Thank you. I wanted to say that we're not thinking about climate change, the climate action plan. About the park, Alan said it though, but people can get to the park by foot and by bicycle, which are two things we want to encourage. My question was, if we decide to ban gas for the utilities, would Williams and Dane back out?
Councilor Taylor, that's something that we're going to be talking about on the 26th. We've had some conversations with them, and we're going to propose a path for council to consider in that regard. So that is forthcoming at this point.
Okay, I think that's something we should be considering if we care about climate action. And I think that Alan has made some excellent points in his email before now, but I think we should delay the infrastructure. And thanks for letting me talk.
And my apologies again, Betty. I don't know why I keep missing you. So thank you all. We are adjourned. Have a good afternoon.